This is Joe Biden, the President of the United States. For the last 2 years, news outlets have been pointing out that Biden has granted far fewer press conferences and sit-down interviews with independent journalists than virtually all of his predecessors. In June 2023, the New York Times made an observation. Joe Biden has given just a fourth of the interviews Donald J. Trump did in the same time period, and a fifth of Mr. Obama's interviews, and none at all to reporters from a major newspaper. Aides limit exposing the president to news media interviews when he could make a politically damaging mistake. Of course, every single time Joe Biden opens his mouth, it's potentially politically damaging. Just like his recent sit-down with CNN's Erin Burnett, who surprisingly started off her interview with guns a-blazing.
Voters, by a wide margin, trust Trump more on the economy. They say that in polls.
And that's true. For example, the latest ABC News Ipsos poll found that voters trust Trump on the economy over Biden by a 14-point margin.
The cost of buying a home in the United States is double what it was when you look at your monthly costs from before the pandemic.
Correct. According to the National Association of Realtors, the average principal and interest payment in February 2020 was $975 a month, with a monthly mortgage rate of 3.53%. 4 years later, mortgage rates rose to 6.78%, with a monthly payment of $2,001.
Real income, when you account for inflation, is actually down since you took office.
Under Joe Biden, real average weekly wages are down 4.4%, and inflation has increased by 19.9%.
Economic growth last week, far short of expectations.
Also true. Economists estimated that first quarter 2024 GDP would see an increase of 2.4%. Instead, it came in at 1.6%.
Consumer confidence, maybe no surprise, is near a 2-year low.
Also correct. According to the Conference Board's Consumer Confidence Index, April came in at 97 points. This is the lowest the index has been since July 2022. So Erin Burnett presented Joe Biden with several issues that are most definitely affecting his re-election campaign. And I'm sure you can guess how Joe Biden reacted.
With less than 6 months to go to Election Day, are you worried that you're running out of time to turn that around?
We've already turned it around, look.
So when presented with the negative reality of Bidenomics, Joe Biden's go-to response is denial, with a splash of misdirection.
Look at the Michigan survey. For 65% of American people think they're in good shape economically. They think the nation's not in good shape, but they're personally in good shape.
So Erin Burnett is like, housing prices are high, income is down, inflation is high, and consumer confidence is down, and Biden's response to all of it is, let me talk about a survey that I like. But what the hell is Joe Biden even talking about? Well, that would be the University of Michigan Survey of Consumers Sentiment Index. And from April to May, consumer sentiment was down 12.7% from a score of 77.2 points to 67.4 points. So when Biden said that 65% of the American people think they're in good shape economically, he's referring to these numbers in the mid-60s. But the problem is, the University of Michigan Survey of Consumers is an index, which means that these numbers are not percentages, these are points. Translation? Joe Biden has no idea what he's talking about.
They think the nation's not in good shape, but they're personally in good shape.
Wait, so Biden claims that the majority of those surveyed think that America isn't in good shape, but at the same time, he claims we've turned it around. Makes sense to me. What's your problem?
One thing I would note within that University of Michigan sentiment survey that we got, one thing that was hit a record was the share of consumers who now believe that inflation will outpace their incomes over the next 5 years. That hit the highest level in the history of the survey. That is not a sign of confidence whatsoever, and it probably explains why the assessment of the current situation dropped 10 full points in 1 month. We've only seen that ever during recessions. We saw it in 1990, we saw it during the great financial crisis, and again during COVID. So these are ominous harbingers all.
And as Stephanie Pomboy just pointed out, From April to May, consumer sentiment was down 12.7%, from a score of 71.2 points to 67.4 points. By all accounts, the Michigan survey was very bad, which means that Joe Biden should not be referring to it. But Joe Biden's the most economically illiterate president of our lifetime, so we shouldn't be surprised. Now, to her credit, Erin Burnett started off strong by hitting Biden with facts and reality. But in typical CNN fashion, when Joe Biden responded with factually inaccurate statements, i.e. lies, there was zero pushback.
So we have a very different view. I look at it from physician, not being facetious, from a Scranton perspective. He looks at it from Mar-a-Lago perspective. He wants to give more significant tax cuts to the super wealthy. Now we got 1,000 billionaires in America. You know what their average federal tax is? 8.3%.
Fact check false. The top 0.1% of the wealthiest Americans pay an average effective federal income tax rate of 24%. Joe Biden is lying. Again, no pushback from Erin Burnett, who just blinks and nods in agreement.
But let me say it this way. When I started this administration, people were saying there's going to be a collapse of the economy. We have the strongest economy in the world. Let me say it again, in the world.
In the world. But again, this is another lie. No one was actually saying that the economy was going to collapse. Joe Biden was handed the strongest and fastest economic recovery in American history. It was an upswing ruined only by several pieces of unneeded Democrat legislation that resulted in massive inflation.
Well, no president's had the run we've had in terms of creating jobs and bringing down inflation. It was 9% when I came to office.
And there's that politically damaging mistake that his aides were worried about. Well, less a mistake than a blatant lie. You see, when Biden entered office, inflation was at 1.4%. But thanks to his incompetence, it rose to a 41-year high of 9.1% in June 2022.
9%. But look, people have a right to be concerned.
Oh, we're concerned, all right. Concerned that the press continually fails to push back on President Diaper Man. If this was every Republican, I guarantee that Erin Burnett would have immediately started an argument. In fact, a real journalist would have noted Biden's previous failed predictions.
And by the way, talk of inflation. The overwhelming consensus is going to pop up a little bit and then go back down. No one's talking about this great, So again, if it turns out that what I've done so far, what we've done so far, is a mistake, it's going to show. The vast majority of the experts, including Wall Street, are suggesting that it's highly unlikely that it's going to be long-term inflation that's going to get out of hand. If we pass the other two things I'm trying to get done, we will, in fact, reduce inflation. Reduce inflation. Reduce inflation.
1 year later.
Wow, 9.1% year over year, much hotter than expected, everybody. 1981, November 1981 is the last time that we have seen an inflationary number this high for CPI. Again, 9.1%. There you go, folks. That is the big story here.
Although GDP last week was far short of expectations.
Oh, it wasn't. Look, GDP is still growing. Look at the response of the markets. Overwhelmingly positive.
So even though GDP was below expectations, Biden again goes into denial mode. No, it wasn't. And again, with zero pushback from Erin Burnett. I know you're shocked. Again, a real journalist may have posed a question like, Mr. President, you've been wrong in the economy before, so why should Americans trust your judgment now? Here's another example of Joe Biden getting it wrong.
It's now projected our economy is going to grow above 7% this year. Projections from Wall Street to the Fed is going to continue to grow.
But in reality, GDP grew less than 6% in 2021. And then in 2022, we had 2 quarters in a row of negative growth. So it should be no surprise that confidence in Joe Biden's handling of the economy is historically low. Americans' confidence in Joe Biden to recommend or do the right thing for the economy is among the lowest Gallup has measured for any president since 2001.
The polling data has been wrong all along. How many, you guys do a poll at CNN, how many folks you have to call to get one response?
So what he's basically saying is that the polls are wrong because the people who are responding to these polls are the wrong people or something. Got it. Anyway, after the CNN interview, Biden's 9% inflation claim was deemed inaccurate by several outlets, including the Washington Post, who surprisingly gave him 4 Pinocchios.
It was 9% when I came to office. 9%.
Inflation was actually 1.4% when Biden was sworn in, peaking at 9.1% in June 2022.
So either A, Joe Biden actually believes that inflation was super high when he entered office, or B, he knows he's lying about it. Either one is disqualifying in my book, but whatever. I'm sure that his aides will make sure that he gives the correct information the next time he's interviewed.
I think inflation has gone slightly up. It was at 9% when I came in.
Anyway, that's it for now. Follow me on X at Don't Walk Run, and while you're at it, subscribe to the channel. As always, thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time, if there is a next time.